What's going on, everybody? I'm Johnny Brook. Welcome back to another Crafting Workshop video, and welcome back to part number 2 of my home bar build. So in this video, I'm going to go over building these drawer boxes to work with the Blum Undermount soft close hinges, which have this really smooth soft close action. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the video.
I used 1/2-inch maple plywood for the drawer sides and 1/4-inch maple plywood for the bottom, and broke down the pieces for the sides on the table saw to start. Before moving on, let's hop into SketchUp so I can show you how these drawers need to be assembled to work with these Blum Undermount hinges. So the inside faces of the drawers need to be spaced in 13/16 of an inch from the inside of the cabinet. And while this sounds like a pretty specific number, it's actually really simple to work out the length of the front and back of your drawer boxes with this measurement. So first I took the inside width of my cabinet, which was 22.5 inches in my case, then subtracted 13/16 of an inch times 2, which is 1 5/8 inches. And this left me with a measurement of 20 7/8 of an inch, which is the length of the front and back panels of my drawer box. And the length of the sides are much easier to figure out. They just have to match the length of the drawer slides, which were 21 inches in my case. The bottom panel of the drawer box has to be inset in from the bottom edge of the drawer box 1/2 inch, regardless of the thickness of your drawer bottom, which was 1/4 inch in my case, and this provides clearance for the slides. Finally, I needed to notch out the back of the drawer, again to provide clearance for the slides, and this notch needed to be 1/2 inch tall by 1 3/8 inches wide, and I'll show you how I cut that later on, and I needed to cut that notch on both sides of the back panel. And that's pretty much all the measurements you'll need to build your drawer boxes, so let's get back to the build. So as I mentioned, I needed to have the bottom housed in a groove, and it needed to be set in exactly 1/2 inch from the bottom edge of the drawer. I set my blade height to 1/4 inch, set the fence to 1/2 inch, and then I made my first pass on all of the drawer sides. After making the first pass, I moved the fence over a little bit less than 1/8 inch, since 1/4 inch plywood is a little bit thinner than 1/4 inch, made a cut, tested the fit on a piece of 1/4 inch plywood, and then made a second pass on all of the boards. And you want the fit to be tight, but not so tight that the drawers will be a pain to assemble. Next, I needed to notch out the backs of the drawer boxes to accept the undermount slides, and I did this at the bandsaw. And I feel like this was one of the faster ways to do this, but there are really plenty of options here. You could use a dado stack on the table saw, or I know my buddy Sean Boyd, who has a great video on installing these undermount slides, uses a template and a flush trim bit. Anyway, as you'll see, I accidentally notched the fronts and backs of the drawer boxes, so I had to go back and recut the fronts, but eventually everything was notched out correctly, and I could move on to assembling the drawer boxes. Once again, I called on pocket holes for assembly here, which will be completely hidden in the finished drawer. And since I used 1/2 inch plywood, I swapped over to the Craig Micro Pocket Guide, which drills smaller pocket holes, which really work better with thinner stock. And you can use the standard pocket hole jig, but I got a lot better results with this micro jig. Once that was set up, I drilled pocket holes on each end of the drawer fronts and backs. And now that the drawer sides were to their final size, I could cut my drawer bottoms to size, and again, I used 1/4 inch plywood here. To assemble the drawers, I added a bead of glue to the grooves and ends of the sides, and then put the parts together. I clamped the drawer box together, used a mallet to make sure everything was flush, and then added the screws. And I used 3/4 inch screws here, which are really the perfect size for this 1/2 inch material. After adding the screws, I checked the drawer box for square, and also checked to see if the sides were bowed at all. And again, this plywood was slightly warped as I mentioned, and if there was any bow, I just added a clamp to the center until the bow was removed. Next, I just repeated the process for the other 4 drawer boxes, and then I could get the Blum slide hardware installed. This Blum system uses these 2 clips at the front of the drawer boxes, which clip onto the slides. And these orange levers allow you to easily add and remove the drawers, and also provide some adjustment to the finished drawer. It's really a cool system. To allow the drawer to accept the sides, there are a few pretty specific holes you need to drill though. First, a hole in the back of the drawer accepts this pin on the back of the slides, which hooks into the drawer box and keeps it securely in place. To drill these holes, I used this awesome jig from Rockler, which is also where I got these slides, and the jig has metal bushings to guide the drill bits, which are also included in the jig, and the jig has a locator slot, which allows you to easily set the stop block on the bits. Anyway, after drilling the holes on the back of the drawer box, I used the same jig laid on its side to drill the pilot holes for the clips. And these need to be drilled at an angle, and this jig makes that super simple. I just repeated the process on the rest of the drawers, and then I could move on to installing the slides. And once again, I called on another jig from Rockler, this Undermount drawer slide jig, which made installing these slides super easy. The jig sets the proper setback from the front edge of your cabinet and also holds the slide securely in place while giving you a nice clamping surface. I also cut some spacer strips out of scrap plywood to help make sure everything was aligned, and these strips combined with the jig made this honestly the easiest drawer slide installation I've ever had. I used a self-centering drill bit to drill the holes and then added the screws. Once the slides were installed, I could install the drawer, which just drops onto the slides and clips into place, and that was it. As you can see, these slides have an awesome soft close action, and the adjustability makes them pretty much foolproof. Also, you can see here just how easily you can remove the drawers just by pressing those two clips. And if you can't tell, I freaking love these slides and will be using them on basically every project I can in the future. I don't know why it's taken me so long to use them. Anyway, to install the rest of the slides, I would first cut down my spacer strips at the miter saw and then just repeat the process. And this went super quick, and once all 4 drawers were in, I could get this super satisfying shot closing all of the drawers. The bottom of the bigger bottom drawer had a bit of flex to it, and I wanted to stiffen it up since it would likely be loaded down with some heavier items. To do this, I added a strip of 1/2-inch plywood to the center of the drawer bottom and just attached it with crazy glue. And I weighed it down with a few gallons of black poly while it dried, and it made a huge difference in the stiffness of the drawer bottom. I went ahead and sanded the drawer boxes with 180 grit as well. And with that, the drawers were built and installed, so I could just move on to adding the false fronts, which I covered in the previous bar build video, which I'll link to in the cards in case you missed it. So that pretty much wraps up this part of the series.
All right, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. These drawer slides were a little bit tricky to wrap my head around. Definitely had to read the instructions multiple times and still ended up screwing up most of the parts and having to recut them anyway. I still would have gone through it all again because I absolutely love the way these drawer slides work. So again, this is part number 2 in my home bar series. If you want to stick around for the rest of the series, go ahead and get subscribed and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next 2 videos. The next video is going to be on building the glass inset doors for the upper cabinets, and then the video after that is going to be building the butcher block countertops, which will really finish off this whole bar. Again, thanks for watching everybody, and until next week, happy building.